Everybody wants high performance, and almost nobody agrees on what it actually means. And that gap between the words we use and the standards that we actually hold is where most teams quietly fall apart. Welcome to the Executive Commute. This month, I want to walk you through 4 ideas from the July edition of The Meaningful Leader. And 3 of them came directly out of conversations I had right here on this show with Jessica Heafey, who's a level 52 coach and facilitator, and with Dr. Murray Heber, who's an expert on flow state, and Dr. Tianne Foster, who's the author of Reality Check, a book on the topic of burnout. Here's the thread that ties them all together. Meaningful leadership is built by confronting the words we use. High performance, belonging, flow, or burnout. We throw these terms around like their meanings are obvious to everyone, and they're not. And when leaders don't define these words clearly, teams are left guessing or pretending or protecting, or most often, they're just quietly drifting around these concepts, which leaves everyone disappointed. So let's get into it. What leaders are asking. If you've stuck around, you know that in our work, we get a lot of questions from leaders through our programs, through executive coaching. And this question is one, it's not the first time, it's a very common one. And that is, what does high performance actually look like? So I've had a lot of conversations with executives about this concept of high performance. And here's the problem. Most teams use that phrase like everyone already agrees on what it means. And I tell you, they don't. People will nod along. They'll drop words into conversations. They'll drop high performance into PowerPoint slide decks. And then they're going to act surprised when the team doesn't magically become faster, sharper, or more accountable. High performance is not this vibe that you just feel. And it's not a poster on the wall in the staff cafeteria. And it's definitely not a group of exhausted people just trying harder. I want you to think about it this way. If I pulled your leadership team into a room together and separately, one at a time, I asked each person to describe what high performance behaviors look like on your team, would I get the same answer over and over? In my experience, there's a wide range of what people perceive or how they articulate what high performance is, which means when you're struggling, you don't have a talent problem. It's more of a definition problem, which means it's a leadership problem. And you can't hold people accountable to a standard that people haven't defined. So this is common work I've done with leadership teams where your job is to challenge the definition. What does high performance look like? What does it sound like in our meetings? What decisions does it produce? And what does it refuse to tolerate? And just as important as these questions, you go to the flip side. What's the opposite of high performance? What would I see on this team in our organization that would clearly indicate we are not a high performing team? What are the behaviors that you keep excusing that are dragging the standard down? Which means you have to get really honest with yourself. I call this whole process bookending. It's something that we teach in our accelerated leader programs. It's about mastering clarity with your team, getting clear on what something really is, what it really means, and what the opposite is. What is the worst expression of this? And when you go through this work together, you get alignment on what a 1 is and what a 10 is. And that gives you a very powerful scale to engage in robust discussion about where your team sits on that scale. And you've created it together so that there is that alignment. Again, this is an exercise I've done with many leadership teams. Make your invisible standard visible. Name the behaviors that signal high performance. Name the behaviors that signal poor performance. And name the behaviors that fake high performance. Then you force the team to confront the gap between what they say they want and how they actually show up. It gives you a standard to hold them to. So when you get your team together next, whether it's high performance, whether it's a meaningful culture, whatever it is, define the standard and see where you're aligned. Let's jump to different ways to think. This is intended to challenge the way that you see something so that you can engage with it differently. And this month, it's about belonging. And I assert that belonging is not something that you give to people. Through my conversation with Jessica Heafey, level 52 coach and facilitator, we pushed on the seductive leadership myth that belonging sits entirely on the leader's shoulders. Make everyone feel seen. Make everyone feel heard. Make everyone feel valued. You and I will both agree that leaders carry a massive responsibility to create the conditions for success. That part is non-negotiable. But somehow, belonging has morphed into something that's perceived by some as a spa treatment that you administer to passive employees, when ultimately it's a two-way contract. The leader creates the soil, and the individual still has to decide whether they're willing to plant something. That means showing up. That means contributing, taking risks, listening, challenging the status quo, or serving the mission rather than waiting to be emotionally convinced that they matter. And here's the part that most people miss. A culture of belonging often breaks into two directions. It breaks when leaders abdicate their responsibility, absolutely. But it also breaks when employees outsource all responsibility for their experience to the organization. That's what we call object thinking, where you wait for belonging to happen to you, when belonging is something you act on. So the question isn't just, do they make me feel like I belong here? The stronger question is, and the question that you have control over, is, am I demonstrating that I want to belong to a standard, that I want to belong to something bigger? And am I willing to step into that so I feel like I belong? That is a shift that can make a difference. And that is a different way to think. Let's jump to the laboratory. I always push the boundaries. I want the people who come into our courses inside our organization to be in this space of experimentation. That's when you find out more about yourself and your world. And in this episode, the experiment in your laboratory that I want you to consider is to read your room in 90 seconds. And it's something practical that you can run this week. And it's straight out of my conversation with Dr. Murray Heber on the Executive Commute, where we dove into the concept of flow state. Think of it this way. In your next meeting, ask one genuine, open question. Something like, hey, what's something we did 6 months ago that might not be serving us now? Then stop talking and watch a few things. One, watch how long before anyone answers. Second, who do they glance at before they speak? And that's it. That's the whole experiment. If ideas come fast and people speak without scanning the room for permission, then it might be an indicator that you've built an environment where people can access their best thinking, their free thinking. But if the room freezes and every eye flicks to a more experienced or senior person first, then your team might be running on threat. And the brain running on threat isn't really thinking. It's not creative. It's in protection mode. Now, flow, creativity, honest dissent, none of it will survive in a room where people are calculating the cost of speaking up. And you don't need an engagement survey. The pause can almost tell you everything. Give it a shot. Run it this week and see what you notice on your team. Okay, a question to ponder. If you've been following me, if you do our work, then you know I love a good question to ponder. Something that is deep, that invites you to see yourself, see your world differently. It's a critical point of reflection. And I think reflection is a master skill that leaders need to exercise and engage with. And this question came out of my conversation with Dr. Tianne Foster when we dove into the concept of burnout. And it lands hardest when internal friction starts to build. When your work might look successful from the outside, but something inside you is really starting to resist it. When you're tired in a way that sleep won't fix because you can't get enough of it, or when your cynicism starts sounding a lot louder than your hope. Well, when you catch yourself fantasizing about maybe an exit and you label it resilience to make yourself feel better, the instinct can be to push harder, keep going, weather the storm and wait for this season to pass. And sometimes that works. And sometimes it will just delay the reckoning. So consider a different starting point. And it might be just brutal honesty. What is wanting to be different? Is it your role? Is it the pace of your work? Your relationship with your work? Is it something that needs to be retweaked with your values or your boundaries? Or is it an aspect of your courage that needs to be stepped into? Because burnout may not be the enemy. Maybe it's a critical warning light that you've been too busy or too proud or too afraid to stop and really read. But here's the thing about warning lights. If you ignore them, it doesn't make the engine fine. It just means you find out later at a worse time and at a much higher cost. So here's what I'd leave you with this month. 4 words: high performance, belonging, flow, burnout. You've used all of them probably in the last quarter. The question is whether you've defined any of them clearly enough to lead through and work with others through. So pick one, define it. What are the behaviors? What it is, what it isn't. Put it in front of your team, because the standard you do not define is still operating. It's just operating without you. So, by the way, the Accelerated Leader Program. If you want to learn more about the Accelerated Leader Program, you get onto the website level52.ca. There are so many stories of impact that make me proud of the work that the team does in stretching leaders, helping them build their leader operating system and the tool set to navigate turbulence with grace. Learn more on our website. And if you've been thinking about it, don't put it off. Jump in and exercise your system. And if you're interested in some of the concepts, burnout, if you're interested in flow, if you're interested in diving in and pulling apart the topic of belonging, then you can find our videos on the YouTube page or find your favorite podcast provider and dive in. Otherwise, I can't wait to see you on the next ride together on the Executive Commute. Make this month meaningful.